We're working with the development. We're going to use the development version of OMFIT. So just to remind you, there are two versions of OMFIT usually available: a master release, which is kind of a older and more set in stone, and one which is called unstable, which is constantly being updated. So we're going to load that one. So we're going to do module load OMFIT unstable. And then we're going to start. OMFIT. To start, I think a good example is if we try to generate a module for kind of a prototypical fusion simulation code. So I picked GenRay as a code. This is a ray tracing code, and it's kind of typical in the sense that it accepts Fortran namelist as an input. It's a Fortran code, and then it generates an SCF output. And this is kind of, typical. Obviously, every code is unique, but so we already have a GenRay module, and I'm going to start by actually importing it. Because I'm going to steal the input file from there. Okay. I'm going to steal this input file. So, but let's assume that we don't have such module. Let's make a new module starting from scratch. So maybe can the remote mute their microphone? There is someone playing the didgeridoo. Maybe I can
make me a
mute. Can I mute them? Okay. No, this is not what I want. Okay.
So mute all bottom left. Okay.
Do we really want to?
Okay, thank you. All right. So we're going to put this module in a location. We can call it my GenRay, for example, and the module ID can be GenRay2 because it's a new GenRay module. So when we do this, this populates the tree with a skeleton. Okay? There's nothing in it. These modules, GenRay takes an input name list, which is here, and a G file. So we need the G file, and actually, I don't have that in hand, so let me import the OMFIT module, and let's generate the G file that we're going to use. So
you not just use a sample. Use the sample.
There's no sample.
Yeah, oh, there's many samples.
Well. I could. I don't know how. I still want to get a physical result out of this. It would be quick, and it's a good. We can just remember how do we run a module. So this sample is meant to be run on 22976 at 3021. And we're just going to generate a G file for D3D from that. So this shouldn't take a long time. So just to recap, we have our original GenRay module. We are running OMFIT just to get the G file that we need to run GenRay. And there we go. So this is the G file that we're going to use to run our simulation. Okay. So I'm going to take this file and I'm going to do Control-C, and I'm going to paste it inside of the input. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-V. Yeah, and that copied it inside. Okay. And I'm going to do the same with this D3D template, or actually this one I'm going to use a bit of a different strategy. I'm going to say we want to move this to in here, and we're going to call it in January, and let's put it right. Okay, so we're all set to kind of start running our code. Okay. So the way we do this is we generally have a script to run the code. We put it under scripts, so we can do that. We can say edit 83 entry. We're gonna add a script of type a task. Okay, running code is a task, and we're gonna place it in OMFIT my January scripts. For example, run January. And we're gonna call the file itself runjanuary.py. Okay. So when we do this, we have this script that has been generated, and again, it's kind of filled with a template, which we can fill out. This script runs generate, and you can fill out more details. So to run a code, what do you need? To run a code, you need input files. You need to know the executable. You need to know where you want to run the code and what is the output. Okay. So the inputs we know, right? So we can say inputs. So to run a code, let me start by saying this. OMFIT is provides you classes to read and write these input files. It provides you utilities to plot and generate GUIs. It also comes with a set of functions that are designed to execute code remotely and do the things that we do. And all of these are, if you go under help, there is this help window. And if you look under task, we want to do a task. There are a whole bunch of things that there are a whole bunch of functions that that we can use. What we're going to use today for running January is this OMFIT X executable. So if you click on this, you'll see the documentation for that function. And so this is if you want a reference for this is where you would go. Okay. Or if you've done it enough time, you just remember. So this OMFIT X executable accepts wants to know what is the module that you're running. Okay. So here we're gonna we could say something like OMFIT my generate, because this is the name of the module that we're running in. And then it wants to know what are the inputs, okay, of our code, and what are the outputs, okay. So
you spell outputs, right?
Outputs. So let's start filling this out, okay. So inputs for us are this G file, okay. So it's a list of things. It's a G file, and then it's this in January file. Okay. The outputs, if you run January, and I'm going to keep this on top. The outputs, if you run January, is an etcdf file. Which has the name of January, which is named after what is this variable in the input name list. Okay, so for us the output would be file, which is named which is named after this variable plus .nc. Does it make sense? Okay, so if someone changes, the name, this entry into the tree, the output name will change, and we want to know what that is, and that's why we do it that way. So we can hook this up, inputs and the outputs. Okay.
You have to address the root.
Correct. So what they're calling me out here for is that everywhere in my script I wrote OMFIT my genre. Okay. Now you can have the same module in different locations in OMFIT. Okay. So this script that I wrote will work right now, but if I have two modules, right, one will be in my genre and the other will be in my genre 2, and so this script will not work. So the way we address this is that we use this special variable, which is called root, okay, which effectively is the name of the module, the location where the module is, okay. So if we want to make things generic, we use root, okay. In general, if you find yourself typing OMFIT square bracket name of the module in your scripts, you have to question that, okay. Because it means that the script that you're writing is not, generic. You cannot put it as a submodule of something. You cannot move it in some other location. Okay?
There's a GitHub that will prevent you from doing that anyway, right?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay, so this is to, we define what are the inputs, what are the outputs. There is one more thing that we have to define, and it's what is the executable, okay? So there are different ways to specify that. So I'll show you how it's often done. So under settings, setup, you see that there is a place for executable. And here we can just write it as a string. So if someone went on Iris, this is where we're running, and had a G file and this in genre name list, what that person does have to write to run generate? Okay, this is what we're writing here. So that person will have to do a module load generate and then run x generate. Okay. So this, we save it as a string, and so here we just have a string that says modulo generate generate. Okay. Now, what this library does is it knows that if we don't specify executable here, this would be the other way of doing it. Okay. Module load. If we don't specify, yada yada. If we don't specify the executable here, it knows that it should take it by default under the settings executable, okay? But we wrote it there, so we don't need this. Okay, so we have the inputs, we have the outputs. Oh, one thing that we have to be careful with, one detail is sometimes you want your inputs to be dumped in the directory, always with the given name. So, in this case, our input file has already the name generate.dat, but maybe someone loads in, a name list and doesn't have that name. So here we can force that file to have a name, generate.dat, oops, .dat. And also one more thing that we have to be careful with is that this name list specifies the name of the G file that generate will use, okay? And again, like with many things, there are, many different ways of doing this, okay? You could decide to edit the name list to reflect the name of the G file that you dumped. You could always dump your G file with a name, with a fixed name, and change that fixed name into the name list, okay? So there's not, one way of doing this. What I will do is I will always set my name list. Okay, here, if the internet allows. And again, we want to do root. We always want this one to have the name of the G file that we used. Okay, so how do we do that? So every object every object which is a file in OMFIT has the attribute file name. Okay, and again, use root. The file name for this file name. Right. So the file name for this is actually the file where the file is. Okay, but all I care about is the last. Piece. Okay, so I have to take only that piece. So I'm going to do os.path.split, and I'm just going to take the file name itself.
Why not just use base name instead of split?
Perfect. You see, because I never use it.
Okay.
But so os path base name.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do? Okay,
Okay.
let's try it. Take a responsibility today. Base name. Okay, this is exactly what what we want. So before running, we're going to edit our name list so that it, in the right spot, has the name of the G file that we're going to dump. The G file can have whatever name. We are not forcing it, but the name list, the generate executable always looks for generate.dat. So we're doing that. And the output, the name of the netcdf file depends on this variable to the name list. So we've done that. So if all goes right, we should be able to run this. And what OMFIT will do is we'll take the input files, put them wherever we want to run, execute the command, and then it will take this output file and bring it back. What we still need to do is to load the output file in the OMFIT tree. Okay. And here, just as a shortcut, if you do Control C, Control V, you see that OMFIT my generate outputs get copied. If I go here and I do Control R, like root, and I paste it, it copies root. Okay, so it's one of those things that when you start developing comes in handy. So under root outputs. Let's put our outputs under something called rays. This is a ray tracing code. We're going to put an object of type netcdf, and we're going to read it. The netcdf will be in the working directory, and it will have this name. Okay. So cross your fingers. And we should hit return. So what OMFIT did was took those files, dumped it into a working directory, and this is now generally running. Okay. So what working directory is OMFIT running in? This is actually written here under. You see, this is the name of the directory. It's a very long directory. Okay. The beginning part of this depends on the institution where you're running. So, for example, at GA, we put our results under local scratch. Your username, this is the project. Like each OMFIT project has an ID. Okay, so this is the ID of this project. And then you can have multiple generate modules. So these are organized by module name. And then you can also do things in parallel. So this is a serial run. So this is a P0 directive. Okay. And we can talk a lot more about things, but this is kind of to give an idea. This shouldn't take too long. Maybe while that runs, what we can do is think about making a graphical interface to this. So we're going to kind of continue or follow similar steps for the graphical interface. So we're going to go edit, re-entry. And instead of a task, this time we want to make a GUI. Okay. And again, what we want to do is, we can call it generate GUI, and there's no reason why it should have a different name, the file itself. So let's use generate GUI.py. Good. So this one finally finished. And if we look under outputs, yes, we have a 2.9 megabyte netcdf file that got sucked in. Okay. So maybe we can decide what to do. But since they started with the GUI, let's continue with the GUI, and then we can look at some plotting. So for the GUI, this is, and I should say, to run a script, you select it and you hit return. To edit the script, you select it and you hit spacebar. Like before, OMFIT provides us with a whole bunch of tools and functions to generate these graphical interfaces. And these are, if you're curious, under the help, under GUIs, there are a whole bunch of graphical elements that you can use in your graphical interfaces. Okay. In general, the way the GUI is constructed is that every one of these graphical elements you could code, that you code in one line of code that represents one GUI element in the GUI. So for what we want to do, let's say that we want to make a graphical interface that will edit maybe the frequency at which these waves are run. By the way, this was a simulation for helicons on D3D. So we want our GUI to edit this entry. So we're going to use one of these functions, OMFIT x entry. We have to tell it what element in the OMFIT tree we want to edit. So it's going to be root, again, inputs in generate wave frequency. And here we write something that the user can understand. Wave frequency, and I think this is in gigahertz. And then maybe we want to add a button to be able to run generate. So this is our script. We can make OMFIT x.button, something that the user can read, run, generate, and then what needs to be run. Okay. And we can do a lot more, but I think and if people are interested, we can play more with this. But this is at the most basic level how things work. So when we run this, we have this graphical interface that is much more readable, and especially for new users. And so when we edit this entry, these things in the tree gets updated. And then if we had to run generate again, we would just update this. So this is for, so we saw how to kind of pull together the inputs, run the GUI. Maybe the next thing that we could do is to look at some plotting of results. Oh, and maybe I can use this opportunity to kind of show a bit how this command box works. So the command box is kind of like a sandbox. It's allows you to experiment with coding without necessarily having to store the script in the tree. So before, for example, you saw I wanted to know what is the file name of the file. You can have more of these until at a certain point you run out of space and probably should tie up your stuff. So if we want to plot something, well, so these are our January simulation results. So if we go all the way to the end, we see that there are some entries in here for let me do it like this. I will use root. So this is the R of R location of the arrays, and then this is the Z location, like this. And so, for example, we can start plotting, let's say plot R and Z. Okay. Now here, I said root, but what is root? Because when you have a script which is inside of a module, it's obvious what root is, right? The script is under this module here, so root means OMFIT my January. But when I'm here, what does that, what root am I referring to? And so this is where this namespace comes in. So this is where we're saying what root basically means. And so we're going to say, when I say root, I'm really meaning OMFIT my January. Okay. And so if we do this, we should see something. Okay. So this is a very rough, so you see these are the arrays as a function of R and Z. It looks like these are centimeters, and you see January actually shot multiple arrays, and this is really not what we want to see. So probably we should use like transposes. Okay, so now I can finally see the arrays. Okay, you can see the arrays going propagating. Maybe one useful function that OMFIT has is it can plot lines with colors. So under the outputs, I think here it is this del power. This is how much power is in each array. So here we can use this plot C, which I think works this way. And we want to, let's do it. So now we're plotting the color represents how much power is in these waves. So at the beginning, there's a lot of power, and then here we can see that there is a lot of absorption. Maybe what we want to do is we want to plot these. So we said it's in centimeters. We want to plot these in meters. And maybe we want to overplot this with respect to the equilibrium. Be good.
Is there a color keyword for plot C? Or does it just do it linearly?
Really help.
Let me finish this and then we can get to it. So so if we plot the G file, okay, so when if you just call plot on G file, and I did this by so certain classes know how to plot themselves. So the G file knows how to plot itself. So I hit return on the G file, and that's what I come up with. What we want to do is just plot the rays propagation on this cross section. And again, you can look at the help or ask. So here we can say only 2D equal true. Oops, true. So we're gonna first plot the G file on the cross section, and then we are gonna overplot the ray propagation. So here you can see how these rays are propagating in the D3D cross section. Okay. And it seems like the code, once it reaches below a certain number, below a certain power, it just puts R and Z's to 0 and 0. And this is, this is kind of what we're seeing with these lines all going to 0. So we could mask them and so on. This can be definitely refined more. I don't know how much time we want to spend on it. So once we're happy, we can maybe save this and maybe as a script under plots. So here we're just going to right click, we're going to save it to tree, and we're going to say plot rays. Okay. And so this generates this this script. If I hit return, I can see it. And most likely, if you do that, you also want to add a button here. Let's see. On with x dot button. We can say plot rays. This is the function that we want to run. Maybe we want to separate it on with x dot separator. And if we want to become fancy, we can put tabs maybe on with x dot tab run and then let's move this here. So when we open the GUI, now we have a run. Wave frequency, the separator, the possibility to run or plotting and plot. So I think this is, in a nutshell, kind of how to edit, how to build your own module.
Can you go under the module of this, the module part of the settings?
Absolutely. So,
for instance, the contact, I guess it set it up as you because you.
Right. So the list of contacts is the people who people should contact in case something goes wrong, or to attribute also some of how the work the work. Oh yeah, actually one interesting thing. Well, maybe one thing that I can show is once you've done this, maybe you want other people to use it. Right? So you want to contribute to the great OMFIT community. So
one last thing there under the module,
yeah.
The default GUI.
Oh yeah, actually that's a good point. Sometimes modules have many GUIs, and so for example, OMFIT has many GUIs. Okay, and the reason why there are many GUIs is because you can combine these GUIs, and actually this is I think a very interesting thing to actually show. If you want to, the default GUI is what GUI should start if if the user double clicks on the module name. So here, if I double click on OMFIT, the default GUI gets started. So if I double click on my module, it just says nobody has assigned it. So all we need to do is we have to write here as a string the location of the GUI that we want to start. Here I because I'm used to do this. If you hit tab on any of the entries, you can quickly edit things without bringing up that whole graphical interface. So this is a quick way of doing it instead of doing edit entry and having this. But the two are equivalent. So that now if we double click on this, the GUI starts automatically. So we were saying that the modules can have many GUIs, and so let's say that we decide that the January module has a submodule, depends on the running of a submodule, and we say this submodule is OMFIT. After all, we saw that it needs the GFL. So that's that's possible. So what we can do is we can take the OMFIT module. Let's move it as a submodule of my January. So we're going to move this, and click on.
I was told Dave Hill was here. It's the wrong meeting, I guess.
Sorry, no problem. So we're gonna move OMFIT from OMFIT to OMFIT my January OMFIT. Okay. So now this one has become a submodule of my January, and we can. Let me also. I like to have all of my modules at the top. So I'm gonna show you also how to move entries up and down in the tree. So if you do Control U, stands for up, you can move this up, and Control D will be moving it down. Okay, it doesn't change anything besides the graphical appearance exactly. So let's say that we want the January GUI, which now has a submodule OMFIT. We want it to be able, the user when it brings up the GUI, we want it to be able to run OMFIT. So to do that, we can edit our January GUI. Okay, we can make another maybe tab, and we call it equilibrium. Okay. And what we want to run is the main OMFIT GUI. So we're gonna copy this. Okay. So we want to run this this GUI. Now pay attention. Root doesn't mean OMFIT. Root, means January. It's the January module. Okay. So we want to run root OMFIT GUI. And so this is a compound GUI. Okay, so by doing that, when we run the January GUI, now under equilibrium, we have the OMFIT GUI. Okay, why is this important? Because let's say that you have a workflow that runs 5 different modules. Your super module doesn't have to replicate all of the functionalities of the lower GUIs. Okay, you just kind of call those out. And then as the lower level GUIs get updated, improved, you just reap the benefits of that. Is that, yeah.
So I think the point about root, what root is with the submodule is kind of important, right? So if you go into OMFIT,
yeah,
and select something and press Control R on it.
Yeah, Control R.
And then you were to paste it someplace else, it's going to give me
the root
with reference to OMFIT.
Correct.
Not
yeah,
to the submodule.
It's the first one.
It's the first OMFIT module up the tree that it finds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the meaning of root. Okay. It's really what module is this script in. Right. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh my. Wow. Time flew. Okay. So let's see how we can push this back. Okay. So to contribute back, what you need to do is we want to take this module and we want to put it into the main OMFIT repository, which is posted on GitHub. Okay. So to do that, what you need to have is you have to be added to the list of developers, GitHub developers. Okay. And either you filled out your GitHub username when you wrote, when you sent us the user agreement, and probably we have already given you access, or you just send us an email. And actually, there are many people who can give you access, not only me and Sterling, to the repository. Once you've done that and you've set up your SSH keys on GitHub, so that you can upload and clone the source code there without having always to type the password. The simplest way to contribute is if you go here, if you go File, Export Modules. So you'll see that under File, this is where kind of the module management is. Okay, so new module is what we did. Import modules is what we've done, for example, to import an existing module. And then we have reload and export modules. And these are kind of the actions that we use to kind of interact with what is in the repository and what we have in our tree. Okay. To do this, what we want to do is, I'm thinking what's the simplest way to describe. So if we look under the list of remotes, okay, so there are different situations, okay, that you can find yourself in. One situation is where you're running a public installation of OMFIT, okay. So then in that case, the only way to contribute is to take your code and push it on GitHub. The other situation that you can find yourself in is that you are a bit more advanced and you cloned your own copy of the repository, and the version of OMFIT that you're running is not a public version, but it's your own version. Okay. When you do that, you can do, you have a lot more control. You can contribute not only to the modules, but you can contribute also to the framework. And when you are in that situation, what you usually do is you take whatever is in your tree, you dump it on your local repository, and then manually you contribute back to GitHub. And this is not something that I'm going to cover, but we have some tutorials online, some Google Docs that kind of describe this second case. So if you're running on a public version of OMFIT, it's public. You cannot, we don't allow you to mess up the modules of others. Okay. So here you see that these buttons are grayed out. I cannot export to these locations. So here what we're going to do is we have different remote repositories. Okay. Here we're going to use the GA Fusion repository. And what this is going to do is going to basically connect and see online what are the developments that are going on, okay, on this GitHub repository. So on GA Fusion, which is kind of the main repository of OMFIT, you'll see that there is a lot of action going on. So all of these are branches. The branch is branching development, and it's someone who's or a group of people who are developing something specific. Okay. Usually, what happens is that the development of certain feature happens in these branches, and then when there is a code review and everybody's happy, then we vote yes, and that thing goes into unstable. After maybe a month or something like that, we run a series of regression tests, and if everything goes well, that goes into master. Okay? So this is kind of the process that we go through. So what we're going to do is we don't want to mess up other people's branches, so we're going to make our own branch. So we're going to call it my generate tutorial. Okay? When I do that, OMFIT is telling me, okay, what do you want to branch off? Okay, so you're really taking a bifurcation in the history of how of the code development. So we're going to branch off of origin and stable, and this is kind of what you should do in 99.9% of the cases. So
Well,
yeah.
I always vote for running on master and then branching from master. That's me. Especially for module 12.
Okay, so 98.9% you can use in stage.
Well, I think 99% of the time, if you're orso and constantly on the cutting edge of development,
Maybe,
but
yeah.
might be different.
Or perhaps you should use the branch that you've been using to develop your module.
Yeah, whatever module you imported the module from, or
Yeah.
whatever. Yes, I agree with that.
So here we see a few things. So we have 3 modules. They have different modules ID. And 2 of them already exist in this, in this repository, and 1 doesn't. So I'm gonna select the one that we just developed, and I'm gonna say detailed module export. So these are all of the commands that OMFIT is, kind of Git commands that OMFIT is doing in the background. So don't get too scared about it. So here we have to decide what do we push into this repository, okay? And the kind of the guiding principle is that you push the things that you need to run the code, like a code like generate, but you don't want to push your data, okay? Because many reasons, right? So if it got recognized as a submodule, we can export that. Of the inputs, I don't want to upload my my G file. I may or may not decide to leave the name list as a template, perhaps. Of the outputs, I certainly don't want to, add my netcdf output. And here, to select or deselect things, you can do it by hitting a spacebar. Okay. So if I hit a spacebar on a subtree, I deselect everything, select everything. If I do it on a node, I can only deselect something specific. Scripts, I want this. I want people to be able to plot. I want people to be able to use the GUI. We haven't played with lib. It's up to us to do it. I wanted to show the help. Maybe we'll edit this and we'll make a second commit. And here we're gonna add some description of what we've done. We can say first version of and here I would say export highlighted entries. And when that happens, OMFIT is gonna take what we said to export and push it on GitHub. Okay. Now, if we go, maybe this is also we have a Slack channel that we use to kind of keep track of all the things that are happening, and so here you can see a whole bunch of discussion going on about different topics. And the last thing that happened was indeed that I pushed the first version of my generate tutorial on this branch. So, for example, we can click here, and yeah. So this is my commit. So if we look at the history, this is what we committed. Okay. So usually when you're at this point, you want to maybe you're thinking about, well, now I want other people to start using it. I want to put it into unstable. Only a few people can push to unstable, and this is for your safety and our safety. So you can play with things without being too worried about breaking stuff up seriously. So to merge things into unstable, what you would do is you will create a pull request. So you can here, if you say new pull request, you can click on this. And this is basically you're asking some of the more seasoned OMFIT developers to look into your code and take whatever is in my generate tutorial and merge it into unstable. So this is kind of the title of your request. Here you can describe what you've done if the title is not self-descriptive. We haven't updated the relevant documentation. This doesn't pass. This doesn't apply. Maybe, yeah, we can say that it's ready for review. That's all we can say. And we can ask.
In general, always post screenshots though.
Okay, so to satisfy this request, you can maybe, you can do that. We can run this. We can do. I do Control and Shift 4. I like Mac. Take a picture, and then we come here and we. It's pretty easy. Just Control V. We just paste it, and then we can say that we show the screenshot. And as a reviewer, we can ask Nick to review it, or the person that you think is more appropriate. Maybe a label. You can say I don't know, enhancement, and then we can create this pull request. So then from here people can comment. We can review the code, and I think yeah, in general it's a very healthy process to go through. If you, I don't know if it. So we have 6 minutes. I mean, we can keep going a little longer, but in general, if you make any update, let's add a title to this query. Title.
I think it's just title.
Yeah. What is it? Better query. So when we run it, and now it has a title. Very important change. We want to export it. Okay. So at this point, sometimes your project can become very big. Your files can become very big. So it's actually faster if you made a change only to the scripts or the module settings. It's faster when you export to click on this export module scripts and settings. So when we do that, what OMFIT will show us now is only the differences between what is in the repository and what is in our tree. Okay, so it's right. We changed Generate GUI. Okay, if we double click on it, we can see what are the differences. Aha, in the tree we added this. So yes, we definitely want to take that. And lib, we left it out, but we want to keep it out. And here, what's the difference? Oh, I think, yeah, this is one is a string, and the other is a Unicode string. It's okay, it's a detail. So, dated UI. And actually, so when we do this, the update again gets pushed. And if you go to where we were before, GitHub should recognize. Yeah, so there has been an update, and so your code. Sometimes you can get comments like, you could do this better, or there's a bug here, and so you can keep developing, and when people are happy, then it's merged. One thing that I want to point out is that there is this help.rsd that you can edit. These are comments. It tells you like a kind of how to proceed, which should be pretty self-explanatory. Here you put the short description of your module, some keywords, the long description, how it's used, if it's supports only certain devices or if it's agnostic, tutorials, and so on. And then what happens is that when we regenerate the modules documentation, so if you go under on the OMFIT website under modules, there is the list of modules, and let's take January, and what that help becomes is gets translated to this webpage. Okay, and also these modules, certain things are automatically generated. So it shows, for example, who contributed and who used this module. I think this is
On the documentation webpage, will you go back to the development page?
The development page. Is good point.
It's almost everything we've talked about today is listed here under develop, how to contribute or how to set up your own repository or developing new modules.
Yeah, there are some Git cheat sheet if you decide to do your clone your own repository, and instead of using the OMFIT interface to Git, if you want to go manual. One of the reasons you may want to go deeper than the modules is to improve the framework, or sometimes to develop some class that allows you to read and write the output of your code, because sometimes your codes can have very strange formats, and maybe the format that your code has is not supported. Another reason you may want to write your own, or develop a new class is maybe to add some functionality, like being able to plot. For example, this has been done for the January. In fact, here we loaded this file as an XCDF, but if we load the same file as a January object, OMFIT January, this object now is can be made aware of the output. This object is aware of what January is. So, for example, if I hit return on this, this object knows how to plot itself. Okay, so you can envision, for example, running a whole bunch of simulations. You store all of them in history, and then if you want to compare them, you just go there and say, and hit return. To develop a class, maybe this is something that may be interesting for the next few minutes.
Actually, I wanted to go back to the documentation page.
Yeah.
You could cover the philosophy of what belongs in what module, what doesn't. The guiding principles for scalable modulation.
Okay, so we talked a bit about this, I think. Let me see, I forgot my guiding principles. Well, one thing is about using root rather than using absolute path, right? That's certainly the guiding principle. The other thing that we didn't cover, but we could talk about, is this idea of dependencies. So sometimes you have a module like generate, which depends on, you have a module which depends on a different module. And so you may think the only way that I can maybe call subroutine or something in the second module is to put the absolute path of that, of that module, right? I mean generate. Let's move OMFIT outside. Or maybe let's even let me think. Let's even duplicate. Let's make another OMFIT module which is identical. So we have two OMFIT modules, okay? And each one we have three G files. We have one G file here, we have one G file here, and we have one G file here. Okay, so right now we are taking the G file that is under inputs, but maybe we want to allow the user to pick any G file or more freely. Okay, so one way that OMFIT allows you to do that is through these dependencies. So under dependencies, what we can say is we can add an entry here, and we can say when people type my GSK, okay, what they mean really is so I made a dependency called myGQDSK that points to this G file. Okay. So now if I go under my scripts, the G file that we used was here, right? So instead of typing that, I can just say myGQDSK. Okay. And OMFIT will take and actually we have that also here, right? Whoops. So what OMFIT will do now is it will take as a G file whatever is written here. Okay. And in fact, if we want to continue with the examples, let's see. There is also there is a 3 location picker. And so what we can do in our GUI, we want to allow the user to select what G file it's going to be using. OMFIT x.3 location picker. We wanna edit root dependencies. My GPSK. So I think if we run this, everything was doing so well. Settings. Okay. The dependencies. I think it's
so while you're doing that, the thing about the GUIs is just obviously when you're developing, what you should do is just start from some other module's GUI and copy and paste a bunch of the pieces of that, right? So you're not expected to know that there's an OMFIT x dot button or an OMFIT x dot command box or whatever it is, entry, alpha box. So you can just open up any other GUI that has something that you like and then grab it from there. So like this tree location picker, you know, you could go a year using OMFIT, not know that exists. But if you see it in some other GUI, then you just grab it. And
yeah, in general, you know, the advantage of OMFIT is that everything is, you know, if you push spacebar on any of the scripts, right, you can see what's inside, right? So if you see something that you say, cool, how do I do that? Then, you know, you push spacebar, copy, and so on. So for example,
Also,
yeah.
I was gonna say, maybe you probably showed this earlier, if you go to help and then under GUIs, it'll have all the different like GUI features that you can.
Right. So here, if instead of this G file, we want to refer to another G file, for example, or the one under OMFIT, if we say, you know, we can either type it or just say 3, and it will know copy it. So if we had to now run it again, you know, it will pick up that other G file. Shall we wrap it up here?
You want to right click on one of the modules?
Yes. Yeah. You want to do setup module?
Yeah.
So this setup module allows you to set up a few things in of the module itself. You can type a comment, something like I am working on this, and this will appear here. You can set up the default GUI. You can the dependencies are listed, and we can also set up where the code will be running. So right now, if you look under remote setup, we're set up to run under the default server, which, you know, it's Iris. If you look under main settings servers, the default is the local host, which is Iris. Yeah, the default is the local host, and the local host is Iris. But you know, you could change that to, for example, say Saturn. Saturn is another cluster at GA, which is set up like Iris. So actually, the same executables will run on both. And the beauty is that if we run it to OMFIT, because we use this this OMFIT executable function, it OMFIT will know, you know, how to gather the inputs, execute the command, and gather the outputs, and it will do that remotely. So it doesn't have to be running on the same machine. Maybe one thing that's also useful is here you can use dynamic expressions. You see that some of these entries are bolded. These are because things are evaluated dynamically. So if you notice here, if I change this to, so here you read Minigini Saturn God.com, and then it's some place. If I change this to a different location, say Iris, this one changes dynamically. Okay, so these are called dynamic expressions, and they are set like. Let me see. Oh, yeah, I want to do it here. So let's say that depending on the server that we're using, we want to use a different executable, different command. So we can do that by going under Edit. When you're working with expressions, it's often useful to use this advanced view of the entry, which is just basically a text box. And so here we can start. We can say this is not a string, but it's a dynamic expression. And so what we want to say if, for example, if my server is a local is Iris, if is server is Iris, okay. Then we want to return variable equal we want to the script to be run to be this. Else, we can, you know, else we want to run, what do we want to run? We want to echo, this is not Iris. And then run that command. So if we update this, now this is bold. It's Iris, right? But if we change this to Saturn, for example, the command that we're going to run is going to be this one. Okay. And you can do this. You know, you can think about some codes can be run in a batch queue. So maybe in your GUI you have an option to run in a batch, and so your script will change depending on, you know, whether you're running a batch or you want to use a GPU, or, you know, so you can go pretty nuts. Okay, I think this is